Okay, we're going to start putting all of this together now. So I'm going to start by drawing some basic head shapes from different angles, and then we're going to go back through and we're going to put the features in. Okay? Let's get started. So zoom in a bit here. So you see here I haven't put in the center line yet, but I've drawn so many heads I can tell that I'm pretty much on for that. Now I may put some necks in, neck and shoulders, probably not shoulders, maybe just the necks. I probably won't be talking about the neck in this course. I just want to concentrate on the head. You can see I didn't draw this flat plane in there, but I know where it is. One thing to keep in mind if you are doing necks is that when you stand up straight, the neck does come out of the head on an angle. It doesn't come out straight like this. Give myself a bit more room here. So keep in mind that there is a curve to the face when you're doing this stuff. Because of that, what's going to happen is the ear is going to, as the head looks up, the ear is going to lower down. And the opposite is also true. So as the head looks down, the ear is going to appear to go higher up. So just keep that in mind. Oops. Try and keep this all nice and neat for you. This is a very extreme angle here. So while we're talking about these angles here, we can actually break these down. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, before I go breaking these down into yeah, I'll finish these heads off, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about that. And so just so you know, these kind of views are probably my worst. Probably the ones that I draw the least, and therefore the ones that I really should give more attention to. But we'll clean this guy up as we're going. We'll do one more of those guys, a little less extreme. Alright, so we can break these guys down a bit easier now. We start to that with the hairline. So we have the hairline up here. Now, with the hairline, you don't want to make the mistake of having it too low. Okay, some people put their hairlines here. So I do my eye here, then my eyebrow, and then people do their hairlines here. That's not correct. You have a forehead, okay? So you need to make sure that you leave enough space for that. Now, the other mistake people make is they do this. That is not accurate. If you look at reference photos, you'll find that the hairline curves like this. Let's exaggerate that for you. So it curves like this, then it comes back down like this. So you have these little spots here, okay, which are bigger or smaller, more obvious or less obvious depending on the age of the person and the baldness that runs in their family. So you can see that's way too low. Let's chuck it up here a bit. Like that. And it's important to put the hairline in if you're going to be drawing hair, which we will. So the next thing we can do to break it down is we can chuck these things in here. So this part would be on the skull here, these parts here. Okay, so let's go back over here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do where the cheekbones is, come down to where the cheekbones is, and then come down to the chin there. It's really going to help us find the planes of the face, which is going to be really important for shading it. Like that. Now, when I draw this, I would do that whole line in one section. the other thing you can do is you can, where the eyes are, we can do this. Okay, and that will, I'll contour out the front of the faces in a minute, but yeah, this is where the brows are, so the eyes fit in here. It's where the brow is, okay? It's up to you whether you want to do that or not. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm not going to for this one. Alright, so let's start chucking in the features. So on the, I'm going to leave the front one for now. We'll come back to that. And I'm just going to work on the outer edges of these faces here and get the contours going. So the first thing, we'll do this one. Actually, you know what we'll do? We'll do this on a new layer. So remember, that's got to be about halfway through, because that's where the nose is. Then the mouth's got to be about halfway again. So remember, we've got to, and this is, the more that you draw faces and the more that you look at faces, and when I say look at faces, I don't mean, you know, you see your friend. I mean, you actually take the time to look at it and realize what's going on, you know, take in the details, the easier this contour will become to do. So this part here, we're going to see less of that as the head starts to tilt down. So it's going to be where the brow comes in, and because of how extreme this one is, we're pretty much not going to see it at all. So we're going to end up with something like that. Missed one here. So this one is, you can see how this is probably the most extreme angle that you're going to see it from. So it'll be a bit more subtle on these ones, okay, but when you're on side on, that will be the most that you can see this indent into the head here in the brow. So this one is almost side on, so we're going to see it pretty well, like so. Alright, easy enough. So let's go to a new layer, and we're going to start laying in the features now. So that's pretty much how I would lay out my heads. When I get to that stage there, it's pretty simple. I just go in and do the features, but I would certainly do the face like this, complete like that before I go putting in the features, although with a side-on face it's a bit different because the features are pretty much laid out. But these ones here are a good example of the point that I would get my head before I start putting in the eyes, nose and mouth. Okay? Alright, so let's do it. Now I know I haven't put the eyes in yet, so but I do, again, from drawing it lots and from looking at it lots, I'm pretty sure that'll be roughly where the halfway point of the eye is anyway. Let's test it out. There we go, look at that. And let's test this guy as well, and again, right where we wanted it. And now we'll stick the brows in. Now remember we talked about the brow generally comes into where the wing attaches to the side of the nose. And it'll go out just past the eyes as well, depending on the person. Let's not forget our ears now. Okay, and I can, if I want to, I can add in the bridge of the nose like that. Okay, kind of break it down so you can see where things are going. Okay, let's do this side on one now. And again, this will be the wing of the nose here, the bulb of the nose here. Don't forget that we have this little this part facing down, this part facing up. I haven't really given this guy much of a bridge of a nose, but we'll chuck one in there anyway. And there we have our brow like that. Now something also that's important to note is we have this fold that comes from here down like this. You can especially notice it in older people, but it's there in everybody, and especially if people smile, you know, if his mouth comes up like this, it's going to push it up like that. Okay, so keep that in mind. Also what you'll have is this part will be facing up, this part will be in shadow, and this part will be facing up here. Okay, so that'll be important later for shading the face, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Now you can start, depending on how heavy the cheekbones are, you can start putting those in. So, the nose is going to be a bit trickier for you to draw now, because we're trying to force this angle here. That's what we want though. Just like that. Okay, stick our mouth in here. So the head is slightly turned, but it's not turned a lot. So this end will be shortened, but it won't be completely hidden. That bottom lip. So probably what I've done here is I've made these eyes too high. So generally speaking, you want them down here. And the mistake I made was I was putting them about the same distance away from the brows as I would with this front on face here. But because I'm looking up at the head, I can see more of what's underneath here. So again, something to be aware of. And I pretty much use the same lines for my ears the whole way through. They don't really change, so some artists change it up a bit more, but like to keep it as simple as I can. Now this one here, it's almost side on but not quite side on, so you're going to see a mostly side-on nose, and that nose is going to be obscuring part of the cheek here. And we're probably only going to see a hint of that eye, if anything at all. And it's going to be a mostly, not quite, but mostly side-on view of the eye from here as well. So something like that. Now this one's going to be really tricky for me. So let's get stuck into that. So I'm going to do my brows first here. So this is something really important to keep in mind here. I'll just finish this guy out first so you can see. Alright, so this line is where the bottom of the nose is, where the nose connects to the face. Here. As the head tilts, okay, we're going to be able to see less of the mouth, okay, or rather the nose is going to start overlapping things and hanging out from the face. For example, if we take this guy here and we rotate him, I'll just bring him down here so that you can see. And I'll put it back in a second, but for now, you can see that if we're looking from this view here, the lines between the nose and the mouth are much closer than they are up here. So we're going to, this is going to seem shorter, even though it's exactly the same distance. Okay, because of the angle that we're on. Also, the nose is going to hang over it a little bit and hide a little bit of it. Okay, that's a very important concept to realize if you want to draw or convey realistic looking heads. The other thing is we're going to see as the angle changes, we're going to see more of the lower lip, less of the upper lip. And in this section here, we would see more of the upper lip and less of the lower lip. So we get lips like that. Just stay there for a second. You see there's more here, less here. So we want more here, less here. So again, we don't need to draw it all, we can just indicate it. So I'm going to flesh this head out a reasonable amount. Let's check our eye in here now. Again, the same thing, because that brow sticks out, so we have this shape here. As we rotate, this gap is going to get smaller and we're going to see less of this part here, just like with the underneath of the nose. So yeah, I'm not liking what I've done here, and again, like I said, this is my worst absolutely worst angle. So keep that in mind when you're judging my awesome pictures. So you can see where I've made a mistake here. And I've made this section here a bit too big. But that is okay, these things happen and it's easy enough to correct. Alright, let's move on to the next one before you guys have to spend too much time looking at that. and this one is a similar angle but not quite as extreme. So I have that nose hanging out a little bit, but we'll still be able to see most of everything. Probably did that guy a bit too high, so I'll just bring him down. Okay, so there we have our heads with our faces on them. Now, one thing I would do, which I didn't do, but I would most certainly rough these out with triangles. Yeah, I didn't need to do that now, but it is definitely something I would do. Alright, so let's finish these heads up now. This is where things become interesting, because what's going to happen here is we're going to need to pick our lines, because obviously we're not going to want to draw, you know, all of these details like that on a finished image. So we're going to have to, depending on our style, pick the lines that we want. For example, and I'll do a couple, I could exaggerate this guy. Like this. You see how these all of my angles are becoming a bit sharper. Okay, so then what we have, if I drag this guy down here so you can see, actually, what I'll do is I'll drag all these guys down a bit. Okay. Now you can see there that with this one here, it's a bit more stylized. Okay, I'll draw it how I would normally draw it now. And this is just how I like to pick the lines, depending on whether you're a big anime fan or what have you. You can do a more of an anime style. That's kind of more of the standard. Well, that's kind of more of a mix between a Western comics kind of feel and an anime kind of feel. This is generally how I would do mine. And obviously I'd probably take a bit more time and care, but you don't want to sit around watching me draw for too long. So it'd probably be something like this. So if I grab this guy and we'll stick him up next to the other guy, and you can see the difference. And they're off the same head, it's the same base head. It's just a different style of drawing, okay? And you get that just through picking your lines. Okay? Good, so we're going to finish this lesson here, and then in the next lesson we're going to come in and we will draw some heads from start to finish, to full completion rather, and I will talk a little bit about hair, maybe I'll do an own lesson on that. We'll see what happens with time.